Okay, so you want to understand Pakistan right now, huh? Well, specifically this whole train hijacking thing. It's a mess, to be honest, but let's try to untangle it.
Yeah, no kidding. It's definitely complicated.
So we're diving deep today into the Balochistan conflict. And for anyone just tuning in, that's Balochistan. It's one of those places you hear about but maybe don't really understand.
Exactly. It doesn't always make the front page news.
Right. So let's start with the basics. We had this horrific attack on the Jafar Express.
Tragic, yeah.
25 people, dead civilians, security personnel. Just awful. And the Balochistan Liberation Army, the BLA, they're claiming responsibility.
And that's really put the spotlight on them and the whole fight for independence they've been waging.
So that's where we need to start, right? Like, what is going on in Balochistan? Why is there this army fighting for independence in the first place?
Well, it's a long story, but the short version is that Balochistan has always been a bit different culturally, linguistically.
They have their own identity.
Exactly. And back in 1947, during the partition of India and Pakistan, Balochistan was kind of forced into joining Pakistan.
Like they didn't really have a choice.
Not really, and that's where a lot of the resentment stems from. This feeling of being occupied, of not having control over their own destiny.
So they've been fighting for independence ever since.
Pretty much. There have been periods of relative calm, but the underlying tension has always been there.
And the BLA is the main group fighting for this independence.
They are the most prominent one, yes. Though it's important to note that there are different factions within the BLA. Some advocate for peaceful resistance, while others believe armed struggle is the only way.
So there's a range of viewpoints even within the movement itself.
Absolutely. It's not a monolithic entity.
And their targets have been Pakistani security forces, but also...
Oh yeah, in recent years, they've really stepped up attacks on Chinese infrastructure projects.
That's right, I remember reading about that. So why China? What's their stake in all of this?
Well, China has invested heavily in Balochistan as part of their Belt and Road Initiative.
The huge global infrastructure project.
Exactly. And one of their key projects is the Gwadar Port, a deep sea port in Balochistan.
Strategically very important.
Hugely. It gives China access to the Arabian Sea and the Indian Ocean.
So the BLA sees this as exploitation.
That's their perspective. They believe that these projects benefit China more than they benefit the people of Balochistan.
So they're attacking these projects as a way to disrupt Chinese influence.
And to make a statement, to show that they are a force to be reckoned with.
And this brings us back to the train hijacking. It seems like Pakistan is trying to play a blame game here.
It does seem that way, doesn't it?
They're pointing fingers at India.
Saying it's state-sponsored terrorism.
But at the same time, they're saying that BLA militants were in contact with handlers in Afghanistan.
It's a bit confusing, isn't it? It's like they're trying to have it both ways.
Exactly. So how do we make sense of this?
Well, it's not uncommon for Pakistan to blame external enemies when things go wrong.
Whether it's India, Afghanistan, the West.
Right. It's a way of deflecting blame away from themselves and their own internal problems.
So instead of addressing the root causes of the Balochistan conflict,
they're looking for scapegoats.
And this train hijacking is just the latest symptom of this much deeper issue.
Absolutely. It's a tragedy, but it's also a wake-up call.
A sign that something needs to change.
Exactly. The question is what? Can this be a turning point? Can Pakistan finally address the legitimate grievances of the Baloch people?
Can they find a way to grant them more autonomy, more control over their resources?
Can they ensure that human rights are respected?
It's a tough question.
It is, but it's one that needs to be asked and hopefully answered.
Well, this has been a really insightful deep dive.
Yeah.
And it definitely raises a lot of questions.
It does. There's a lot more to explore here.
Absolutely. And for anyone listening who wants to learn more, I urge you to do your own research.
Read up on the history of the Balochistan conflict.
It's a complex and often overlooked issue.
But it's one that has the potential to destabilize the entire region.
So it's definitely worth understanding.
For sure.
Thanks for joining us today for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
See you then.